The rancher wanted a simple bride, but the Apache beauty who arrived left him doubting his own heart. He had never imagined his life any other way. The ranch had been his whole world for many years. Every morning he woke before the sun, pulled on his worn boots, and stepped outside to face the land he worked with his own hands. The wide fields, the fences, the animals, and the changing sky were familiar companions. He knew the sound of the wind before rain and the silence that came before night. People often said he was a strong man, but deep inside, he was simply used to being alone. As time passed, the work became heavier. Not because the land had changed, but because he had grown tired in ways he did not like to admit. Evenings were the hardest. After supper, the house felt too quiet. There was no voice, no movement, only the ticking clock and the sound of his own thoughts. Neighbors had started asking gentle questions. "Have you thought about marrying?" they would say. At first he brushed it off, but slowly the idea settled in his mind. He did not dream of love stories or romance. He was a practical man. To him, marriage was about balance. He wanted someone who could share the work, keep the house running, and understand the long days without complaint. He imagined a simple bride, someone calm, quiet, and used to rural life. Someone who would not ask too many questions or expect more than he could give. In his heart, he believed this was enough. Through distant family connections, an arrangement was discussed. It was not unusual in their community. People helped people. The details were kept simple. He was told a woman would come to live at the ranch, someone who needed a new start, someone strong enough for hard life. He did not ask many questions. In his mind, everything was already decided. The day she arrived, the rancher stood near the gate, waiting. He expected an ordinary meeting. Dust rose from the road as the vehicle approached. When it stopped, the door opened slowly and she stepped out. In that moment, something shifted inside him, though he did not yet understand what it was. She was Apache, and her presence carried a quiet strength that was impossible to ignore. She did not rush or look nervous. She stood tall, her movements calm and sure, as if she belonged wherever she stood. Her eyes were observant, taking in the land, the house, and the man waiting for her. She did not smile too quickly, nor did she lower her gaze. There was respect in her posture, but also dignity. The rancher felt uncomfortable, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she did not match the picture he had formed in his mind. This woman was not someone who would fade into the background. She seemed deeply connected to herself and the world around her. He greeted her politely, trying to hide his confusion. She returned the greeting in a soft but steady voice. As they walked toward the house, silence filled the space between them. It was not an awkward silence, but it was heavy. He found himself wondering about her past, her thoughts, and the road that had brought her here. Yet he said nothing. He reminded himself that this was not meant to be complicated. Inside the house, she placed her bag down neatly and looked around. She did not criticize or comment. She simply nodded, as if acknowledging the space. The rancher explained a few simple rules, mealtimes, chores, and expectations. She listened carefully and agreed without argument. Her calm acceptance made him uneasy. He had expected questions or hesitation, but there was none. That evening, as they shared their first meal, he noticed the way she ate quietly, respectfully, as if honoring the food. She thanked him, not with exaggerated words, but with sincerity. He had never thought much about such details before, yet now they seemed important. After dinner, she offered to help clean without being asked. Her movements were efficient but gentle. The rancher watched from a distance, feeling strangely like a guest in his own home. He reminded himself again that he had wanted a simple arrangement and that things would settle with time. That night, as he lay in bed, sleep did not come easily. He replayed the day in his mind. He had expected relief, a sense of completion. Instead, he felt restless. The woman in the next room was not a stranger, yet not someone he understood. He wondered why her presence affected him so deeply after only one day. The next morning, she was already awake when he stepped outside. She stood near the fence, watching the land as the sun rose. She did not interrupt him or ask what to do. She waited. When he finally spoke, she followed his instructions carefully, learning quickly, working without complaint. Throughout the day, he noticed small things. She treated the animals with care, speaking softly to them. She moved through the land as if listening to it. At one point, he saw her pause, close her eyes, and breathe deeply, as if grounding herself. He did not understand it, but he felt something stir in his chest. By evening, he realized his original plan was already slipping away. He had wanted order, not emotion. He had wanted ease, not uncertainty. Yet here he was, questioning himself in ways he never had before. As the sun set and shadows stretched across the rancher stood alone for a moment, looking at the land he thought he fully understood. For the first time, he sensed that his life was about to change, not because of the work, the seasons, or the land, but because of the woman who had arrived with quiet strength and left him doubting the simplicity he once believed was enough. Life on the ranch slowly settled into a routine, but it was not the routine the rancher had expected. Each morning, the work began early, just as it always had, yet now there was another presence moving through the space. The Apache woman rose before sunrise, often finishing small tasks before he even stepped outside. She did not wait to be told what to do, but she also never crossed boundaries. It was as if she carefully studied the rhythm of the place before becoming part of it. They worked side by side, but words were few. He showed her how things were done, and she learned quickly. She did not complain about the heat, the dust, or the long hours. Still, she did some things differently. When he noticed, he felt unsure whether to correct her or let her continue. Somehow, her way seemed thoughtful, almost respectful, and he found himself allowing it. Inside the house, she kept things clean and orderly, but she did not try to change anything. The furniture stayed where it was. The walls remained bare. She did not try to make the place her own, and that unsettled him more than if she had. He had expected noise, movement, and small disagreements. Instead, there was calm, and that calm forced him to notice things he had long ignored. During meals, she ate quietly, but when he spoke, she listened fully. She did not interrupt or rush to fill the silence. Sometimes he caught her watching him, not in a curious way, but in a way that suggested she was learning who he was. It made him uncomfortable, as if he were being seen more clearly than he wanted. In the evenings after the work was done, they often sat in the same room without speaking. He read or fixed tools. She sewed, cleaned, or simply sat by the window, looking out at the land. The silence between them was not empty, but it was full of things unsaid. He told himself this was fine. This was exactly what he had wanted: peace, order, no complications. But slowly, questions began to rise in his mind. Who was she before she came here? What had she left behind? Why did she seem both strong and guarded at the same time? He wanted to ask, but something held him back. He feared that once he opened that door, things would no longer remain simple. One afternoon, as they worked near the barn, a sudden storm rolled in. The sky darkened quickly, and wind swept across the fields. Without speaking, she moved to help him secure the animals. She followed his lead, but she also anticipated what needed to be done. By the time the rain fell hard, everything was already in place. They took shelter inside the barn, listening to the rain drum against the roof. For a moment there was no work to distract them. The rancher felt an urge to speak, to say something meaningful, but the words would not come. She stood nearby, calm, her eyes focused on the distance. Finally, she spoke first. Her voice was soft but steady. She commented on the strength of the land and how it reminded her of places she had known before. It was not a full story, just a small piece of herself. He nodded, unsure how to respond. Yet that small opening stayed with him long after the storm passed. As days turned into weeks, he noticed how her presence affected the ranch itself. The animals seemed calmer. The house felt warmer, though nothing physical had changed. He found himself listening for her footsteps, noticing when she was not nearby. This awareness bothered him. He had not invited emotional attachment into his plan. The woman, however, remained careful. She did her work well, but she did not lean on him or ask for comfort. At times, he sensed sadness behind her quiet strength, but she never let it surface. She carried herself as someone who had learned to rely on herself. One evening, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. The rancher introduced her simply, without explanation. The woman greeted the guest politely, but the rancher noticed the way she stiffened slightly, as if uncertain of her place. Later, after the neighbor left, guilt washed over him. He realized he had not once asked how she wished to be introduced, or what she felt about being there. That night, he sat alone longer than usual, staring at the table where they had shared their meal. He understood then that two worlds were living under the same roof, his world of habit and control, and her world of memory, tradition, and survival. They were connected by circumstance, but not yet by trust. As he lay awake, the rancher admitted something he had been avoiding. The woman was not just fitting into his life. She was quietly changing the way he saw it. And the more he tried to keep things simple, the more complicated his heart became, even as the house remained silent around him. Time moved forward in quiet steps, but inside the rancher everything felt unsettled. The days looked the same from the outside. The sun rose, work was done, meals were shared, and nights fell silent. Yet something unseen had begun to grow between them. It was not spoken, not planned, and not invited, but it was there all the same. He began to notice how often his thoughts returned to her, even when she was not near. While fixing a fence or checking the animals, he would catch himself wondering what she was doing inside the house. When he heard her footsteps behind him, a strange awareness filled his chest. It confused him, because he had lived alone for so long without missing anyone. Now presence itself had weight. He tried to tell himself this was only adjustment. Anyone would need time to get used to sharing space, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. There was something about her calm strength that drew him in. She did not demand attention, yet her quiet nature made him pay attention without meaning to. The woman noticed the change as well. She could feel his eyes on her sometimes, though he always looked away when she turned. She sensed questions forming in him, questions he did not yet have the courage to ask. Still, she stayed careful. Her past had taught her that sudden closeness often came with pain. She believed it was safer to keep parts of herself hidden. Some evenings after the work was done, they sat across from each other, the space between them filled with more than silence. He wanted to ask about her family, her childhood, the land she came from. But each time he opened his mouth, the words stayed trapped inside. He feared that knowing her story would make it harder to keep emotional distance. At the same time, guilt began to trouble him. He had entered this arrangement thinking only of his own needs. He had wanted comfort, order, and help. He had not considered what she might need, or what it cost her to leave her world behind. The more he observed her, the more he realized she carried herself like someone who had already lost much. One afternoon, while repairing a broken gate, he injured his hand. It was not serious, but it bled enough to slow him down. Without hesitation, she came to his side. Her movements were quick and sure as she cleaned and wrapped the wound. She did not panic or overreact. She simply helped, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. As she worked, their hands brushed. The contact was brief, but it sent a strange warmth through him. He pulled his hand back too quickly, surprising both of them. She stepped away at once, her expression unreadable. Neither spoke, but the moment lingered long after it passed. That night he could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the simple act of her helping him. He felt ashamed of his reaction. He had wanted control, distance, clarity. Instead, he felt uncertain, aware of emotions he had buried for years. He wondered if he was being unfair to her by pretending this was nothing more than convenience. The woman lay awake as well. She had felt the change in him, the tension in his movements, the way his voice sometimes softened without him noticing. It scared her. She had learned to survive by standing strong and alone. Allowing someone into her heart felt dangerous. Yet part of her longed to be seen, not just as a helper but as a person with history and worth. Days passed, and the distance between them shifted in small ways. He began asking simple questions, how she preferred certain tasks, whether she needed anything if the work was too heavy. These questions were small, but they mattered. She answered honestly, surprised by the concern behind them. One evening, while the sky burned orange and purple with sunset, they stood together watching the land grow quiet. He spoke without planning it, saying that the ranch had never felt so alive before. She looked at him, really looked at him, and nodded. She said the land responds to respect, not ownership. Her words stayed with him long after she walked away. The rancher began to question his own beliefs. He had always thought strength meant control and silence. Now he saw another kind of strength in her, one rooted in patience, memory, and connection. It challenged him, made him uncomfortable, but also curious. Still, fear held him back. He worried that if he allowed himself to care, he might hurt her or himself. He worried that he was not capable of being the man she deserved. These doubts grew heavier with each passing day. As the season shifted, so did his heart. He realized he was standing on uncertain ground, no longer satisfied with distance, yet afraid of closeness. The simple life he had planned was slipping away, replaced by questions he could not ignore. Late one night, he sat alone at the table, listening to the quiet house. For the first time in his life, silence did not feel peaceful. It felt full of words waiting to be spoken. He understood then that his heart had already begun to change, whether he accepted it or not. And the longer he stayed silent, the more he risked losing something he had never planned to want, but now could not stop thinking about. The change did not arrive suddenly. It came slowly, like a shadow stretching longer at the end of the day. The rancher began to sense that something important was waiting between them, something that could no longer stay hidden. The silence they shared now felt different. It was no longer calm or comfortable. It carried weight, as if the past itself was asking to be noticed. One afternoon, while they worked near the edge of the land, the woman paused and looked toward the distant hills. Her face softened, and for a moment she seemed far away. The rancher noticed and felt a quiet pull in his chest. Without thinking too much, he asked if she was thinking about home. The question surprised them both. She did not answer right away. Instead, she took a slow breath as if deciding whether to speak. Then she nodded. Her voice, when it came, was steady but careful. She said that home was not just one place for her. It was memory, family, and land tied together. She spoke of learning respect for the earth at a young age, of being taught to listen before acting. She did not speak of pain directly, but it lived between her words. The rancher listened without interrupting. He felt something shift inside him as he realized how little he had truly understood. He had thought of the land as something to manage and control. For her, it was something to honor. That difference had shaped her entire life. Encouraged by his quiet attention, she shared more. She spoke of leaving behind people she loved, of choices made out of necessity rather than desire. She did not ask for sympathy. She simply explained who she was and where she came from. It was the first time she had allowed herself to be fully seen since arriving at the ranch. As she spoke, the rancher felt a deep sense of regret. He saw clearly now how narrow his idea of a simple bride had been. He had wanted someone who would fit easily into his life without asking him to change. He realized how unfair that was. She was not simple. She was strong, thoughtful, and shaped by experiences he had never faced. When she finished speaking, there was a long silence. This time, it felt different. It felt honest. He told her that he had never meant to overlook who she was. He admitted that he had made assumptions, believing that practicality was enough to build a life. Speaking these words was not easy for him. He was not used to explaining his feelings. She listened, just as he had listened to her. When she spoke again, she said that respect mattered more to her than comfort. She did not need grand promises. She needed to know that her identity would not be ignored or diminished. Her words were calm, but they carried truth. That evening, the rancher walked the land alone, thinking deeply. For years, he had believed that strength meant standing firm and unchanging. Now he saw that real strength might mean listening, learning, and allowing himself to grow. He thought about the quiet ways she had changed the ranch without forcing anything. He thought about how much he admired her, even when he had been afraid to admit it. Over the next few days, small changes followed. He began asking her opinion on matters of the ranch. He noticed how carefully she thought before answering. When she suggested ways to care for the land that honored its natural rhythms, he listened. To his surprise, things improved. The work felt less heavy, more meaningful. The woman noticed his efforts. She did not praise him openly, but her trust began to show in small ways. She spoke more freely. She shared stories, some joyful, some quiet. The space between them slowly softened. One evening, a disagreement arose. It was minor, about a decision regarding the animals, but it mattered. In the past, he would have insisted on his way. This time, he stopped and listened. He asked her to explain her reasoning. When he realized she was right, he admitted it. The moment felt important, not because of the decision itself, but because of what it represented. Later that night, she thanked him, not for agreeing, but for listening. Her words stayed with him. He understood then that partnership was not about control or convenience. It was about shared respect and choice. Still, doubt lingered. The rancher wondered if it was too late to change the foundation of what they had begun. He worried that his early distance might have caused harm that could not be undone. He feared that if he reached out fully, he might be rejected. The woman carried her own doubts. She had opened her heart just enough to let him see her truth. She wondered if he would truly accept it, or if old habits would return. She did not want to lose herself again. One night, as the house settled into quiet, they found themselves sitting together at the table. The lamp cast a soft light between them. The rancher spoke honestly, telling her that he was learning, that he did not have all the answers, but that he wanted to do better. He said he respected her not just for her work, but for who she was. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Then she nodded. She said that respect was a beginning, not an ending. Trust would take time. He agreed. As the night deepened, both understood that something important had shifted. The past had been acknowledged, not erased, but honored. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer felt empty. The rancher realized that the land he thought he owned had taught him something new. It had shown him that growth comes from patience and humility. And as he looked across the quiet room, he knew that his heart had changed in ways he could never undo. The days that followed felt calmer, yet deeper than before. Nothing dramatic happened, but everything felt different. The rancher no longer moved through his life on habit alone. He was more aware of the land, of the house, and most of all, of the woman who shared his days. Each morning, when he stepped outside, he noticed whether she was already awake. Each evening, he found himself listening for her presence before the silence settled. He began to understand that choosing a life partner was not about convenience. It was about choice, respect, and responsibility. For the first time, he accepted that he could not shape another person to fit his life. If there was to be a future, it had to be built together honestly. The woman sensed the shift in him. His words were gentler now, his actions more thoughtful. He no longer assumed. He asked. He listened. When decisions needed to be made, he included her. These small changes meant more to her than promises ever could. They told her that he was trying, that he was willing to grow. One afternoon, they worked together repairing a fence damaged by wind. The work was slow and steady. At one point, the rancher paused and thanked her, not just for the help but for her patience with him. The words came out awkwardly, but they were sincere. She smiled softly, a rare smile that reached her eyes. It was the first time he felt certain he was moving in the right direction. As weeks passed, they shared more moments like this. Conversations grew longer. Silence became comfortable again, not because things were unspoken, but because they no longer needed to hide. She spoke about her traditions, how certain times of the year carried meaning. He listened and asked questions, not out of curiosity alone, but out of respect. In return, he shared parts of himself he had never spoken aloud. He talked about the loneliness he had carried, the fear of growing old alone, and the mistake of believing that emotions were a weakness. Speaking these truths was difficult but freeing. She listened without judgment, understanding more than he expected. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky darken, the rancher admitted something important. He said he had once wanted a simple bride because he was afraid of change. He confessed that meeting her had challenged him in ways he never imagined. He did not ask her for anything. He simply spoke his truth. The woman took time before responding. She said that strength to her meant knowing who you are and standing by it. She told him that she had not come to the ranch to disappear into someone else's life. She had come because she needed safety and dignity. She said that if they were to move forward, it had to be with honesty and mutual respect. He agreed without hesitation. For the first time, his choice was clear. He no longer wanted comfort without meaning. He wanted partnership, even if it required effort and vulnerability. From that moment, their bond grew naturally. They shared responsibility, laughter, and quiet understanding. The ranch became a place of shared purpose rather than control. The land responded as if recognizing balance. Work felt lighter. Even hard days ended with peace. There were still challenges. Old habits do not disappear overnight. Sometimes the rancher caught himself slipping into silence when he should speak. When that happened, he corrected himself. He learned that communication was not a burden but a bridge. The woman, too, learned to trust more deeply. She allowed herself to relax, to feel safe enough to hope. She no longer felt like a guest. She felt seen. One morning, as sunlight spread across the fields, the rancher realized something simple and powerful. He had not lost control of his life. He had gained meaning. The woman beside him had not complicated his world. She had enriched it. He understood now that love was not loud or dramatic. It was built in daily choices, in respect shown through action, and in the courage to grow. The simple life he once wanted had transformed into something better, not because it was easy, but because it was real. Standing on the land he once believed he owned, the rancher knew the truth at last. The greatest thing he had learned was not how to work the earth, but how to open his heart. And in doing so, he found not just a partner, but a future shaped by understanding, dignity, and shared strength.